All right, coming up on this episode of Small Town Charm, the past of Better Nolensville, how we all got involved in politics, how is Better Nolensville related to For Nolensville, and was it a huge conspiracy? Was it a secret that For Nolensville was related to Better Nolensville? And how did we get so many darn signatures in the middle of a pandemic? All coming up on Small Town Charm. All right, welcome into Small Town Charm, the show kind of about the lovely small town charm that we have here in Nolensville. My name is Daniel. We got Chris and Mike here. First off, if you're watching this or listening to this, whatever platform you're on, please do us a favor and subscribe on that platform. If you're on one of the podcast platforms, especially make sure that you leave a review, especially if you actually like this show. If you don't like this show, you don't have to leave a review.
Do not leave a review.
Yeah, we're totally fine with that. All right, so this is about, I can't remember when we actually recorded the last few episodes, but it was at least a week ago. Yeah, it's been a week. It's been about a week and a half, maybe.
A week and a half.
So I thought, maybe the first place we could start this week is just talking about what's happened in this last week or so, especially with us launching the podcast. One weird quirk about the way we do this podcast is for it to be realistic for us to do this many episodes, we have to kind of batch record them. That's just, and it's obvious if you watch the other episodes, that's what we did. But this is the first time we've gotten a chance to record since any episodes came out.
Right.
So I think, I've done some podcasting before and stuff, never a video podcast, but I feel like I've been pretty happy with, how things have gone. We've gotten some hate. We've gotten some people who love it. I think we've gotten a decent amount of people watching the show.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. Personally, I've only heard from a few people. I've actually heard from some people in my neighborhood that I was actually really surprised that they liked the show and liked the name of the show because that was the first thing we talked about.
Right.
But I haven't really heard directly anything too negative. I mean, what about you guys? Anything of note?
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously gotten a few negative comments. I think we've all seen those, though. They've been pretty public. They've either been on our page or on subsequent Nolensville pages that we've posted to. I've gotten a fair amount of DMs, though, in support of this. Also from people I can't say I didn't expect them to like it, but I just didn't expect to hear from them.
Right.
It was surprising to me that they were listening. So I think one thing that did surprise me is there's very much I don't know if I can really say this because we don't have the data to prove it necessarily, but there is a kind of a silent majority, I think, of people who definitely support the things that we're talking about and just being honest and transparent about stuff that's going on, and they're not necessarily willing to go out on platforms and comment and like things, and they don't necessarily want to be associated with anything political, but they are willing to listen, and we're seeing that in the numbers to some extent of how many people are following the pages and paying attention.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. It's encouraging.
I mean, I think that's what I love about the shows that I listen to or watch the most. The things I love the most about them are when someone is saying something that I really agree with to the point where it's so specific that it's I would have said that myself. And I hope that one of us will say something, every once in a while that a few people here in town feel that way about. And I think that's what's happening. Have you had, Mike, I know you probably have the biggest reach here in town. So you're probably getting more feedback, good or bad, than either of us are. What's it been for you?
Yeah, so my perspective is a little bit more unique because I did the Insider, and I can see this trending the very same way, where you have the majority of negativity comes in a public forum, on our page, on a 401 or whatever, but all the DMs are very positive, very encouraging. I think me and Chris got a DM the other day, and it was love the show. Here's some things that would change, but if you don't change it, I'm still gonna listen no matter what. And then that's the majority of the feedback that we've gotten, and it does trend very much like the Insider did. where it kind of takes you back by like, wow, like this person listened to this person read this blog, or this person listened to this podcast. I didn't even know that this person's on Facebook much. But the launch was insane. Kudos, guys. I remember there was a very distinct moment with the Insider where the drama boiled to the point where it just became the thing to do to go read a blog, and we reached that pretty much on the first episode, where you do have people that are completely on board, are gonna listen to every episode, are gonna tag me on a bunch of seltzer posts.
Sponsorship.
I drink seltzer. They're delicious. But yeah, I mean, I'm extremely happy, and like we've all figured that the drama around the name is gonna die out. And
it pretty much has. I feel like already.
Yeah, there was like just the other day somebody like poked fun at me for it. They're like, when it launched, people like, and there wasn't a big amount of people. It was a few people that were upset about it. And I mean, to their credit, like, if you're on that, if I don't disagree with that point of view. That it's not an unrealistic point of view, but it lasted like what 24 hours, and that same person that kind of went hard the first day was poking fun at it a week later. And it's like,
I actually think like the people. It's interesting because the people who know, I think people who know us personally. There were some people who didn't like the name, but they like every single person that knows us that then gave us negative feedback about the name. I felt like everyone was being fair in how they expressed, that to us. It was only people I felt that maybe don't know really like kind of our personalities or like kind of how we approach things, were being a little more judgmental maybe about why we had that name. Well, I want to make sure that a couple of things. One, I do want to bring up that we got feedback too. Like, I think you mentioned someone said to you, I have some things I would change, but if you don't change anything, I'll still listen. Or was that you, Chris?
We both got that DM.
You said, okay, that's what it was. Okay.
Yeah.
I heard some feedback. Some people said it needs to be shorter. Some people said it needs to be longer. I do think that like based on kind of that, I do think that one thing we can do that will help a little bit is we're not going to artificially limit ourselves to a 30-minute roll of film, but we're also not going to stretch something out so long that it's just like we've said everything, we're just beating a dead horse. We're just going to talk about a topic as long as it warrants being talked about. And my job, thankfully, is being the dummy of the group, is that I can kind of hopefully take the objective perspective and say, let's make sure we touch on these things, or I can ask the questions that maybe you guys already know the answers to, and so you don't think to even ask them. But I think an interesting place to start, we kind of decided this would be our election, and not like current election, because we've already talked about that, but like elections from the past, and just in general, why we decided to become more active. Because long before this podcast existed, all three of us in different ways and in some similar ways were very active in local politics. And I think it's important for people to, because a lot of people think they're uncovering some amazing Da Vinci Code-esque conspiracy when they claim things about the three of us.
Right.
And there's not been one single thing that I've seen pointed out that we haven't already all just been like, how do you not already know this? We've already admitted to these things.
Right.
So I think we could be thoroughly transparent. And honestly, selfishly, I want to have a podcast and a video. So when some genius comes up again, like, oh, I figured it out, I cracked the case, I can just say,
just link
to the video where we already admitted to all of it.
Right.
Because I don't think a lot of people who are opposed to us are willing to do those same things.
Right.
At all.
Yeah.
We know for a fact they're not.
I think the only thing that I get combative about with that stance is that I don't view anything that I did and talking about the things that I did as owning up or like coming clean. I take pride in everything I did. So like the only thing that upsets me with when somebody says, well, he's part of Better Nolensville, it's like, heck yeah, dude. Like it took like months. It was during the pandemic. That's one of my highlights of my life thus far is being the first small town in Tennessee to change its charter. I mean, that's pretty dope.
Yeah, I'm proud of that too. Yeah.
So somebody saying like, well, he was part of Better Nolensville. It's like I don't have to own up to it. Like I would love to have August 6th be Charter Day.
Yeah.
Like if I ever
Yes,
if I
yes.
ever get elected,
Right,
one of the very first things I'm doing is I'm running up an amendment or an ordinance. August 6th is from now on Charter Day.
I want a Charter Day parade. I want to like you dress up with like famous people from the charter change. You know, I want that to happen. You know, I want like the like I want to have like a town attorney like carrying like Tennessee state law like a blindfold as he walks around like he can't see it. You know.
I think a few months ago I actually was lobbying for us to approach like a state representative to actually get them to like memorialize that we were the first
In the whole state.
Yeah, like that the state should like recognize that there actually is a town that did this.
Yeah,
there's a town that's trying to do this.
Yeah, right. That's right.
And they're like they're using us as precedent to like keeping impact fees, like only having one question on the ballot.
Mm-hmm.
Like if they're using us as the gold standard, and then if you mention something inside of town limits about that, people still have like weird feelings about it. Which is one of like the most extraordinary things we've done in town is that change.
Yeah, I think we should talk about that. It hit me literally just as we were having this conversation that we've personally had some of these talks about like Better Nolensville, for example, and the charter change.
Yep.
But there has never been like a public like almost like a post-mortem you would do for any like major project or anything. Like there's never been like a discussion about what that was like.
Right.
After it happened. And I think that would be really cool to talk about. And so I want to get there. But first, I think I'd love to hear a little perspective from each of us about how we got involved in all this craziness to begin with. Because, you know, I personally, I think I'm probably the newest to all of this world. And we're all different personality types, right? So I bet Mike doesn't feel this way as much as I do anyway, and he would never. But it does like kind of like never leave my mind all the way. Like it does cause me a little bit of stress. It is much easier for me to just like stay out of it. Like I know after the Better Knowns when the charter change stuff happened, for like a solid 6 months, I just like turned off Facebook and was like, I'm out, you know?
Yeah.
So like it, for me at least, it is kind of like, it's not necessarily a positive experience in all aspects. It actually is kind of hard a lot of the time on me. It floats around in my head pretty much all the time. I am emotional about things, anyway, it's not necessarily like just a whole bunch of fun that we all just decided to jump in on. Right. But I don't know this for sure, but I'm pretty sure Mike, you would be the first of the three of us to have gotten involved. Is that fair to Chris? Because you started a business.
I was publicly. He was way ahead of me on getting involved in it.
Okay, so maybe
I think maybe not involved from like a publicly outspoken like advocate against what was going on.
That was
I think it was that was definitely like Mike was the first, but
that was the nature of your business though, mostly, right?
Yeah,
you really didn't want to shoot yourself in the foot.
Right. I think we mentioned in an earlier episode that I started Mill Creek Brewing, and basically trying to get out of the gate and get the business up and running. I, like any good business owner, realized like, you know, it's all who you know. Mm-hmm. This is a small town, so I knew starting a brewery from talking to other brewery owners in Nashville, like you need to get to know the people in government because there are just all these things that come into play with especially making alcohol that I soon realized in Nolensville are even like 10 times harder.
Right.
So so I mean, I met Mayor Jimmy Alexander, who's sadly no longer with us, but I met him really early on in the process of starting the brewery, and met several of the people that are still involved in like the town staff, and they were very helpful in, I guess, giving me some pointers on kind of like what I could and couldn't do. Felt like I had built some bridges there, and then as I got a little further into the process and had to actually go and get some things voted on, became very aware that there was a process of how you actually play politics in Nolensville. So, you know, some things that people may not know, like I served beer at Mayor Alexander's reelection party at some point in the past. I don't remember what year.
Was it Little Darling?
It was Little Darling. So we have a little bit of a weird history there, but yeah, I mean, at that re-election party, I remember standing in a room. It was at Miss Green's house, and people drinking beer, and there were all of the other aldermen. There was, yeah, I don't know if we're gonna name names, but
I mean, who was there at this party? I think that's
yeah.
fine.
I mean, so there was Larry Feltz, Tommy Duggar, Jason Patrick, Brian Snyder, and I mean, it was the entire board of mayor and aldermen celebrating the mayor getting reelected. I think I think he ran unopposed.
Oh,
so
yeah,
I
sure.
don't know like how much there was to celebrate, but
that's fun. You plan your re-election party well in advance.
A win is a win.
Yeah.
you know, but I felt like as a business owner, I felt like I had to be there based on what I was going through at the time. I remember I was trying to lobby for like I wasn't going to be allowed to have a tap room. That was a big question mark for us opening, and so.
What did you have at first? So what was your permission at first?
So the permission was that we would be able to sell growlers to go. So you couldn't actually come in and
you couldn't consume.
You couldn't consume on premise, but you could sell growlers to go.
And then you had the manufacturing in the back.
Right, and so like they made some concessions to even let us open because we had some certain distances, you know, between schools and parks and things like that like we were kind of coming up against. It was the only warehouse space in Nolensville, so it was like either you let us do it here or we don't do it at all. So I can't say that they didn't work with us in some ways. I want to be fair to that. But I remember at that party, Jason Patrick walked outside to go to his car, and I like ran outside after him to flag him down to try and lobby him a little bit on, hey, like I've gotten to talk to all the other aldermen. Like, what's the deal? Why can't we make this work? You know, he was on the younger side of the board at the time, so I figured like maybe he'd be a little more understanding. I mean, he certainly listened to my points. I remember having lunch with him and Brian Snyder together at one point, and they both certainly took my points in. But when push came to shove, and we actually came up for a vote to get this done, nobody was willing to put it through. And so the brewery opened. We had no tap room. If you know anything about breweries, it's a major part of their revenue stream. I mean,
it's your overhead, right?
Yep. And so, fault on me as the entrepreneur. I believed in the dream rather than the reality to get started.
Yeah.
But that really hurt us not being able to start that way. What happened from there on out then is, we came up for vote after vote after vote every year. We had to go back to get our beer permit voted on again for the tap room. And so every year from there on forward, it's like we kind of inched our way.
What was the explanation for that? I actually never asked you that. So
the explanation I always got was, this is how Nolensville's beer ordinance is written. And so it was always written with this like food percentage that you had to have a certain amount of food sales to be able to sell beer.
Yeah. R.I.P. Nolan's place.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And because of the food percentage and the fact that I didn't want to be in the food business, there was just no way that they were willing to look at getting around that. And so it was kind of like a let's try you on for size situation where we'll let you get open, we'll let you sell some beer to go, we'll see how this goes, and then after a year you can come back and then we'll see if you're a nuisance to the public.
So it was like a trial basis.
And so then, the next year they gave us like 3 days a week for 15 hours a week that we could be open to sell beer. And so you could come in, you could drink between the hours of 4 and 9 o'clock on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And that was it. And so we made do with that as best we could. And we did that for about 2 years. And then we came back the next year, and every year it was just like pulling teeth to try to get them to vote in our favor, to give us less restrictions, let us sell beer like every other brewery in Nashville. And eventually it got done when I was, in the process of selling the brewery and going and on my way out. That was like literally the last thing I ever got the board to vote on before I left was getting just no restrictions at all.
Can you point to like a specific moment that was like a turning point for you where you said like you were playing the game. You always played the game, of course you had to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. But was there a moment, I don't want to use the word like antagonistic, but like where you became, instead of like saying I'm going to kind of go with the flow with this government, where you kind of switched and said, even if it wasn't publicly facing because you had to schmooze people or win people over, was there a moment internally where you said, this doesn't feel like it's going the right way, like from like a moralistic standpoint, like something's wrong here? Was there a moment you could point to and say this happened? Kind of what got you fired up enough to say like this really is important?
I don't remember what year it was. It's probably around 2017 or 2018. Your wife Liz had started working at the brewery. I remember we sat in a meeting with Mayor Alexander, and I had some one-on-one meetings with him. Then we had a meeting, like Liz and I together, with some of the staff and the mayor. The mayor had basically promised me individually that this was going to get done, like that the restrictions were going to get removed. We paid our dues, and basically we'd never had the police called. There'd never been a drunk driving incident, like nothing.
Right.
And I mean, keep in mind, they used to send like the police to like park at the end of Johnson Industrial.
I saw them all the time.
Like, I mean, they would just like park them out there on Friday nights.
Because you were on a trial basis.
Yeah,
right?
like I mean, it was absolutely like we had Big Brother, like just trying to nail us. And yeah, I mean, I felt like we had passed the test, and so I basically said that to the mayor. Like I feel like we've done a great job. I feel like the public supports us and really wants this. And I felt like he had promised me that he could bring the board together. I also went out and lobbied all of the other board members. So I went to Tommy Duggar's office, had lunches with Larry Feltz, Brian Snyder, Jason Patrick, all those guys. But when push came to shove, we walked into the meeting to get this voted on, and it fell apart. And so I don't know if like Mayor Alexander just didn't feel like the board was going to go in his favor and didn't want to be the only guy voting for it, or I have no idea. Nothing was ever explained to me. All I know is I was made a promise behind closed doors, and then it never came to fruition. And so at that point, I kind of realized that, one, don't ever trust the promise made behind closed doors. But two, it doesn't matter what conversations I had with these people. They were having conversations without me.
Right.
And there was something else going on. And so at that point, I didn't start becoming very publicly outspoken, but I definitely started asking questions.
It's interesting you mentioned, one of the last episodes we talked about how like we just want people who are running for office to make a public statement. I kind of see how that might matter to you.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what, in the same way that person is having a conversation with you, and they're having conversations between themselves, that same politician might be having conversations, or definitely is, with other people.
Yeah,
who
absolutely.
have opposing views, and they might be making different promises to them. The whole point is to be publicly accountable.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be the first to admit I probably have a little bit of like PTSD,
right,
surrounding like being lied to by politicians. In
right.
Nolensville.
You might, yeah, I get that.
Don't we all?
Right. Okay. So, Mike, tell me a little bit about. We got about 4 minutes, and then I'll have to stop and switch cameras. But we'll keep going after that.
Unlimited time, all right? Let's do this.
No, tell me about how you got kind of really caring about this town's government and getting involved.
Right. I moved down here in April 2018. I didn't have a Facebook. I think this is the conversation we had on a pilot.
Yeah, the
podcast.
lost episode.
Never gonna
never will get aired. Yeah.
Came down here in April 2018. Didn't have a Facebook. Didn't care for social media. I had experience with online communication because, I'm 35 now. I grew up in the beginning of the internet age. Like all my buddies, we all communicate via text messages or chats, and I've always been on Twitter. So that's kind of my lane there. But I never wanted a Facebook. When we moved down here, that's when Russell Gill started his writing campaign, and Caitlin was my wife Caitlin, she's like, dude, you gotta reactivate your Facebook, and you gotta hop on this page called the Nolensville 401. It's pretty insane. So I was like, all right, I'll check it out. And then right when I did that, Derek Adams was running for alderman against Tommy Duggar and Steve Cody. and there was a burner account made so we don't know for sure who made this account, but we know that Jimmy Alexander's daughter-in-law invited that account into this private group, and she was trolling Derek Adams while he was actively campaigning, and
Some pretty nasty stuff.
yeah, she was
Personal stuff.
Yeah.
right, personal stuff, and it was like he was going through an adoption process for his daughter. He was on a lookout for fake accounts. He a reverse image searched her profile. It came up as like a travel agency stock photo. As soon as he outed that account, the account just vanished. And I was like, well, this is like, I looked at everything that was going on. I'm like, okay, there's a 35-year-old guy that lives just down the street from me running for this alderman seat. And he's kind of running with his writing candidate that's trying to do Nolensville right, but giving Nolensville an option instead of having Jimmy Alexander be unopposed again. Like, I kind of gravitated towards that, and there was definitely a feeling of like, well, like, he's very nice. Like, this 35-year-old Derek Adams that lives on the street is almost too nice. Like, if it was me, I would just go in guns blazing, like, just out everybody.
Coming from Chicago, that's kind of what you do, right?
Right. And he was just very PR, very, very calm about it, and we just kind of I got together with him. We had coffee, and him and me and my wife, we started talking about all this stuff, and like the beer ordinance was one of them. That was his big push to change that, and I reached out to Jimmy at the time, and I asked a bunch of questions. I went to a few BOMA meetings, and my big thing was that I did feel like there was a little bit of management going on in terms of like every time I asked the question, there was a very managed answer coming back, which was the answers were always 75% correct and 25% puff to like make me like not dig deeper.
Yeah.
And then I went to I went to a BOMA meeting, and back then they had they gave you the whole budget. They used to vote on cash statements, and there was the cash on hand statement. I had at the time, I'm gonna make up numbers just for a fact, it was like $12 million. So if cash on hand, there's $12 million sitting in the bank, and then I have in front of me Jason Patrick sitting up there and telling me that we're broke, we can't afford to do things. And that's kind of what triggered me. I came home. My wife has a finance degree. I came home. I showed her the cash on hand. I'm like, I see money here. They're telling me there's no money here. Like, who's right, who's wrong? And she goes, there's money there. I'm like, okay, well, that's I'm done trying to ask questions to find out what's right. At this point, I know what's right, and I'm just gonna start a blog, and the rest is history.
All right, so my story is much shorter than either of yours because I think my time involved is much shorter. We met through you having the brewery. Basically, we moved into Ballinger Farms, which was in a straight line pretty close to the brewery.
Yeah.
And we knew where the brewery was. And then you may not know this, but like the way we actually met personally, or I think Liz met you. No, we both met actually at this thing. I was in a band that we were like the band at church for Haley from Paramore. And
What?
yeah. And so like we like knew her, kind of like we were acquainted with her. Like we saw her out a few times, and she like came up to us and was like, I think even at this event that I'm about to talk about, she was like, hey, like I know you from church. I was like, yeah, like that's great. Like you know,
I know you from MTV.
Right. Yeah, which is funny because she would always like, I would notice like, you know, she would get bothered after church sometimes. So she started like coming in kind of like after everything got started, and then would leave a little early just at the end, you know, so that it wouldn't be weird at church for her. But anyway, I thought it was really cool. But anyway, there was a beer festival happening in Franklin, which is where our church was at the time.
Yeah.
And her husband at the time was sober, and so typically you have a beer tent at a festival that's going on. Instead, at the beer festival, they had a coffee tent for people who didn't want to drink beer, and so they had like a bunch of different guest DJs like coming in and like playing their favorite music in the beer tent, and she had asked us to come in and do a guest DJ set, and so we all kind of picked some of our favorite songs, and we were there hanging out. But while we're there at the beer festival, We knew this brewery existed close to our house, and we see Chris and a few other people
walking
from the brewery.
around with the shirts.
Yeah, you had shirts
I
on, so we're like,
remember
that's them.
Yeah.
And so Liz came and tracked you down. I was like, just wanted to say hi. I think I talked to you as well. And you said, come have a tour sometime.
Yeah.
And so a few weeks later, this was before the tap room was open or anything, you invited us, and then Liz's family was in town. We all did a tour. It was awesome. Fast forward, we started going to trivia. We got to know each other just through that. You hired Liz, and we kind of like adopted the brewery as like our like surrogate child almost. Like we loved it just as much.
Became fam.
Yeah. And so we got to know Chris really well. And fast forward again to one of those BOMA meetings where the license or the agreement, the permission came up again. And you said, hey, I think it's really important, that we go. I went because it mattered to me. At that point, I was really like personally, just emotionally invested in the brewery being around. I was there almost every day. Our child was there all the time. Like he loved the place. And so we went and you had like had conversations about things that were going on, some of the things you mentioned with me. And it was just, I could see like your frustration, but everything that you were frustrated about made sense. It's very like, it just makes sense. It's very common sense. It's very logical. It's not like you're just mad because someone was mean to you or whatever. You had a valid point. None of this made sense. And I thought maybe if I don't know what I expected from a BOMA meeting, but when I went there, it was just like, I had a little context being on the 411 of like kind of how the government talked to people or thought of like people on Facebook, whatever that means, because they're just people. But I went and my mind was just like blown at how, unprofessional the whole thing was, how confusing it was, not because I didn't understand procedures. It was just like it almost felt like there was that like one of those Lord of the Rings movies where like the king gets like possessed or whatever, and there's that guy like whispering in his ear, and it was the town attorney like telling him what to say the whole time.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
It was just like he didn't even know like what was going on, and here's this system where like that's the guy making the call, and it's not personally a personal attack on him. But like you can watch the videos and see how that went. It wasn't going well. And the problem was you can't change that.
Yeah.
It was just insane. And so I was like, there's something more to this than just like Chris being unhappy as a business owner that things were being promised or not quite going his way. There's something else going on here. And so it kind of like perked up my ears a little bit. And I think, it probably was 6 months, maybe even a year later. I'll never forget. I was sitting on like the end of the bar at the brewery that like is close to the door, kind of close to the food truck. Mm-hmm. I was sitting over there, which is like kind of where I always sat.
That's the Daniel's seat.
That was my seat. That's where I always was.
The Daniel seat. That's right.
And he comes over, and I don't remember exactly what you said, so I'm paraphrasing. It probably wasn't this extreme, but you're like, "Hey, do you want to like overthrow the government?" And like that's not what you said.
That was the start of Better Nolensville.
Yeah,
I remember that.
And you said, I was like, maybe I don't. What do you mean? Again, I don't think you said those exact words, but you said I'm meeting with some other people tonight, and so if you're interested enough, like, just come to this table over here. I'm pretty sure it was you and Mike.
That's how it went.
Yeah.
And I think I don't want to blow him up. But there was another person.
He takes great pride in this too. It was their ghetto.
Yeah, he was there, and there was one other person that I don't want to bring up his name right now. It's not fair. I don't think. Who might have been there was there at some other time, but I know the four of us, me, you, and Derek, were all there, and you all were talking about things that were so like there was so like no context. I had no idea what. I wish I could like have recorded that conversation because I think now I'd know everything you were talking about.
Yeah.
But it was just like it was like jumping like I don't know if you ever watched Lost. It was like starting Lost in like season 4 or something. It was like it was
pretty much that's a good description.
Yeah. But I was like I was catching up little nuggets of things. I was like, if half of this stuff is even kind of true, like there's something seriously wrong in this town, and so I know that like that's kind of where Better Nolensville started, and I think we want to talk about that a little bit. I know that that was late in the year, maybe 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And
That was like around this time, 2018.
yeah.
Yeah.
And basically all through the winter and the spring of into 2019, we just kept talking sporadically, and none of us like really let go of the idea. In my mind, I've known enough people in my life who like kind of say they're going to do things and like they just like never actually do them. It's like the musician like, oh yeah, we're going to hang out sometime. We never
Right.
hang out. So I kind of like didn't really believe it was ever going to happen. We just kept like meeting every once in a while and kind of just kept going down the path and getting a little more serious. And like even now looking back on it, I can't believe that we actually did it.
Yeah.
There's so many triggers to like allow us to stop, right?
Yeah, yes.
No one was getting paid, one. Two was like heavy law. Like none of us are lawyers.
Yeah.
It was inbred in like heavy law. And then COVID. Like
Yeah.
COVID happened. Like we launched signatures, like the whole campaign to get signatures because we needed like what, 3,000 signatures or something.
Yeah.
Like we launched that a week before COVID shutdowns happened.
And interestingly, like we kind of started this thing, and I think one of the reasons why we were successful was that it's funny because like I was like, I take exception to that. Someone posted something about how Derek was the leader of Better Nolensville. Oh, someone in public comments at the planning commission
Right.
mentioned. I was like, Derek wasn't the leader of Better Nolensville at all. I took exception to that.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't either.
Right.
But like, we all had a role that we
Right,
were playing,
right.
and I think that's why it was successful. But I think that's also why like people called it a political machine, or like will want to refer to it that way, who don't like what we did.
Right.
Because we were very well organized. And I remember like it was very clear the whole time, this is your job in this organization.
Yep.
Organization's not the right word. This group.
Right.
I was the marketing guy. I
Right.
was like the PR, like write the statements.
Yep.
But I wouldn't say anything unless I got the thumbs up from like we had like a leadership. Like we had some people who were like the kind of like the board of
Yeah.
Better Nolensville.
Yeah.
There were a few people
That's
who
right.
would like give the thumbs up or thumbs down, and then the rest of us were working. It wasn't a machine. It was just organized.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And I know you were a big part of organizing everything.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget, this is kind of jumping ahead, fast forwarding a little bit maybe, but I'll never forget there was a time when we kind of already announced the name Better Nolensville. We kind of already put some statements out. We already kind of started the work. And I don't want to give away my whole strategy politically because I'm helping some people. I'm helping Lisa right now, and so I don't want to do it. And there's some stuff that I think is important strategically.
Mm-hmm.
But there was one thing that I really wanted to say publicly. I had a whole statement written, and I was like, we need to do this like as soon as possible because the people who are opposing this are going to do this thing, and it's
Yep.
going to be not disaster. It's going to be bad for us.
Yeah.
If they do this without us saying something first. And the board, the people who we had all entrusted and said, we're going to delegate the leadership role to you all, whoever that was, you and a few other people.
Yeah.
They didn't want to do it.
Right.
And I was not happy about it. But I was livid the day that the other side did the thing that I knew they were going to do. And I was like, but no one was stopping me.
Right.
I had access to the social media account. I could have just posted it.
Right.
But it was that discipline that we all had
Yep.
to like
Stay together.
look for the greater good
Yep.
and like not go out rogue and like
Yep.
say things that the whole group didn't agree with. That's what got us through the whole thing.
Yep.
And I, looking back at it, I think one of the negatives about the whole thing was that we almost like did that too well. We almost branded it too well.
Yeah.
Everything was too like well done to the point where people almost didn't trust it because it seemed too polished.
Sure. Yeah. I do think it's important to go back, I guess, a little bit and talk about like how it started. Like we talked about a little bit like how we all kind of got into it.
Right.
But there's some backstory, I think, even before that conversation at the brewery, right? So and
Obviously,
and
you
it
had
involves
asked,
two of us that are here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So after Mike moved here, at some point when Mike got involved, like politically and on Facebook, the Insider comes out. There starts being commentary made publicly. The blog is there, and was still involved at the brewery and became very aware of it and was following it, and like I was like, man, this guy is saying like all the things that I think are going on. He's calling attention to all the stuff that is like obviously like there. Like there is like all the corruption that I think exists. Like he has some proof that's actually going on. You know, he's calling attention to like some of the financial like shenanigans that were occurring.
Right.
And it was like you couldn't argue that like that he didn't have the data points because like your wife's an accountant.
Right. Well,
You know?
no, she's an analyst.
I mean,
don't call
okay.
her an accountant.
Okay, sorry, she's gonna like shoot me for that. But I mean, she has a financial background
Right.
to where she can draw attention to this stuff. So it was just like eye opening, and I remember we actually dawned on this the other night.
It was
I
yesterday.
sent you a Facebook message. Yeah, it was last night. I sent you a Facebook message, and we realized that it was the first time I'd sent you a Facebook message since 2019.
As soon as I gave you my phone number.
Yeah, and that's when I was like, "Hey, dude, what's your number? I want to talk to you."
Yeah.
So, and we've stayed in touch and texted ever since. But I was reaching out that night because I was like, you know what? Like, I have to tell this guy my story. You know, like he's tapped into something that is going on. He knows there's something going on. Let me give him some of the backstory of what has occurred before he moved here. And so from that moment on, Mike and I started talking regularly about all the stuff going on and everything that we were seeing. And other people started coming into those conversations. And, you know, just my researcher side of my brain, I can't let things go at times. And so I don't even know where this came from, but like I started reading state law about various things, trying to figure out like, okay, what is in our charter that allows this to happen, or what allows this to happen? Why does the mayor have so much power? And I don't remember what night it was, but I just remember distinctly one night sending Mike this text, and I was like, holy shit, you'll never believe what I just found.
And you
remember the text.
Oh yeah, there was a statute.
And it was just, and then I just like linked to the statute, and it was a statute. It was the part of the board of like the BOMA charter, or the what was it called? The Mayor Aldermanic charter, I think. It was the part of that statute that talks about how you change the charter, and it just lays it out. It's like step by step. Like if you can get X percentage of registered voters to, you know, show up and sign a petition, then it will go on a ballot. And then if people come out and vote on the ballot, then bye charter. And then you can, then they can vote on whatever charter they want to put in place.
There's a little bit more context though, because that was like right around the time that Southwalk failed. And I remember like it was getting very combative on the board with Derek on there. Derek was trying to change the beer ordinance. He was trying to get some road funding. He got put on the MPO, then got taken off by the MPO, from the MPO. Then got put, like there was just so much politics going on. And we were trying to get a recall going. We're like, we have to get a new mayor because this environment's super toxic.
Yeah.
And then the BOMA type of government does not have a recall.
So be careful though. Like I want to make sure you clarify this, because it sounds like if I was someone who, especially if I didn't like Mike, I don't like the Nolensville Insider, I don't like the three of us, I would say it sounds like you just don't like what the mayor's doing, like so you just need to replace him. Like there's got to be more to that than just that, right? Like what was it that was like so ineffective that you thought a recall would be necessary?
It was just a game. It was always a game, and it became to a point where it was like you have to silence whatever's going on in the background because you didn't like it. So it started up with Creekside. They wanted to connect Creekside, and then that was the first actual movement in Nolensville. People started wearing red shirts, having signs at BOMA meetings, a mayor being extremely disrespectful to those residents, and it ended up failing. They didn't like the movement succeeded, the motion or the amendment failed, so they didn't connect Creekside. And then after that, it was the write-in election, and then Derek being on the board and trying to get the beer percentages changed, beer to food ratios, road funding, budget issues. Dude, there was like a year that like we reported 10 months out of the year on budget, and to make it look like we're not making as much money. Like we were constantly over like 20% of
like
revenue.
10 months instead of 12 months.
Yeah, so like
we just shaved 2 months off the year.
Yeah, we just shit like, and we like they presented to the public, this is how much money we collected, and see, it's like we did well, but like we don't have all this money. And then when they send it up to the comptroller, there's those two missing months.
I do remember there was a meeting where Caitlin, your wife, came and like made this presentation to the board about how there was like $400,000.
It was like $400,000.
There's like $400,000 that wasn't accounted for in the budget that they had available to spend.
This was like in the middle of Better Nolensville stuff, because I was
I mean, it was like a huge deal. But I think we could do an entire show dedicated, and we will for the record we will.
Yeah.
Just dedicated to like the misgivings and the failures of BOMA.
Yeah.
Everything that we saw that like was wrong, corrupt, just the things that we have opinions about. I think we definitely are going to get into that. But I think to Mike's point, there were a lot of things leading up to why was I even looking at that statute.
Mm-hmm.
But I will never forget sending that text message and being like, holy crap, like we can do this.
Did you even consider that as a possibility going into it? Like, so for me, the reason why I said RICO first was because at that time, my political knowledge at that time, that was the only course of action that I knew that existed. Like, if you don't like a politician, you recall them. Did you know that you can change a charter?
No, I think that's actually that's a great point, because I think that is actually what sent me down the rabbit hole. Was I think you and I started having a conversation about a recall, and I was like, great, I'm going to just start looking at it. And so I think in researching whether or not you could do that in Tennessee, that's how I ended up on, well, you can't actually recall them. You can just recall the entire government, though.
Yeah.
So that's how you do it. And so, we talked about it internally, just you and I, for weeks about like how would this even be possible? What could even happen? And then we started bringing other people into the conversation, and it just became really clear that, okay, if we're going to do this, like the burden to actually get it over the hill is going to require an immense amount of effort, because like the amount of people that live here has changed from when the charter was instituted. So like to get the percentage of voters to actually sign this petition is a huge number. I don't even remember what the number is.
It's like 3,500.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a certain percentage, right, of total.
Right, but they have to be like in actual ink.
Yeah,
like
they can't be
like wet signatures.
We could do an online petition.
Correct.
We couldn't do any other version of that.
Correct. And so like it was just the things we were going to have to do were just insane. And I immediately was like, okay, like I'm very entrepreneurial. Like the only way I know how to do this is to like organize it.
Yep.
So we had that conversation. That's when I brought you in at the brewery. That's kind of what led up to that timeline.
And I will, like, there's a lot of details that may or may not be interesting. I do think that like the pandemic and what that did to us, I thought for sure that was just, that was the death knell for us. Like that was it. We had, we were going around knocking on doors with a petition like you do normally with a petition.
Right.
For maybe a week and a half ish. I don't know, maybe a little more than that, but it wasn't long. And that the pandemic already existed, but then it was like all the shutdowns, everything happened, and all of a sudden it was like you don't knock on anybody's door. You couldn't do that. There's no way.
Right.
And so I know the first few things we did were we asked for volunteers to basically have like petition signing stations, and we set them out like I know what we did at our house.
Yep.
You set out a little stand or a chair or something, a stool, something. You put a clipboard and some hand sanitizer and a bunch of pens, and you say, we put a sign up, it's a signed petition here, and we also put it on a website that said anywhere, if you're out and about, you can come here and sign, wash, clean your hands, do that whole thing. And so that was one thing we did. And then there was also, for a while we also added on the idea of if you wanted to sign the petition, you could ask someone to come to you if you were schedule a certain time, and then a volunteer would go to your house and sign it. And these were like, it's funny because you have these pages of petition that are like 25 signatures per page or whatever, and you'd have all these individual pages that were like 3 signatures on a page. And I don't know exactly what it was, but something at some point kind of like dawned on us as a group. It was like, well, if we can turn in like an incomplete petition page, like what are the limitations of the petition?
Yeah.
Like what necessitates, like what constitutes a petition? And so we asked a whole bunch of questions of the election commission and said, like, basically, what can we do? Like, would this work? They said, no, you can't do that. What about this? No. We make a special consideration because of the pandemic. No, it has to be this. It's just the way it is. And that's when we came up with the idea of the door hangers. And I think that was like the key was we came up with a door hanger that had, we would put a door hanger that was perforated. So the bottom half of the door hanger you could just tear right off, and it had all the language that was required by law and like a spot for maybe like 4 signatures and all the information you had to put with it. And then it was also pre-stamped with everything ready to go. So all you had to do was tear it off, sign it, and put it in your mailbox. And we had a P.O. box that it would come to. And then we also had stapled like some extra information to the door hanger so that people would. And I still have a few left over.
Oh, I have like 100 left over.
Yeah.
Hold on. I'm so glad you went down this route because we have to explain. There's going to be times in this podcast when either of us refer to you as Danta.
Oh.
So Danta is a combination of Daniel and Santa because it was his P.O. box. He would go like a couple times a week to empty out the P.O. box, and he would like log on to a chat and tell us how many signatures he got. So we started calling him Danta. It was the guy that was bringing gifts a couple of times a week. I can't call you Daniel on the text form anymore. No, I do not.
Well, it's funny because like I maybe someday we'll post these or something. But like some of the pictures I would take from the P.O. box of these like thick stacks of postcards that would have signatures. Yeah. We get 60 or 70 in a day, and it was like, man, this actually is working. And it was like it was the most like positive thing in the world. And it was so exciting to be a part of that.
I don't think we ever like calculated this, but I'm just curious, like what percentage of signatures do you think we actually collected?
That's a good question.
Through door hangers.
I don't have the information, but I bet it's half.
At least 50%. Yeah.
And it was also funny.
Which is nuts to think about.
Yeah, it was always funny to get like, because I look at all of them because you want to verify them and like
right.
And then I would actually drop them off at Lisa Garamoni's house, and so I would I always let her know I was coming over, and I drop them on her front porch or hand them to her, But we'd always get like the joke signatures, people who hated us, it would be like, no in giant letters, or there was a fake Jimmy Alexander signature on there.
I remember that.
Which I knew for a fact he didn't sign it. It was like someone playing a joke on us, But that was a great time, and honestly, I'll never forget. We had moved into this house by that point too, where we're recording this. I'll never forget like the night that election happened. We can talk a little bit about that maybe in one more segment. We were about to run out of time again already, but we'll make this as long. Like I said, we're not going to limit ourselves.
Right.
So we'll talk one more segment about this. It might be a shorter one, and then we'll do another episode later. But I want to talk about the transition from Better Nolensville to what we called For Nolensville, and like some of the funny things that happened around that, and like why we changed the name. Was it a secret? Are those things not related? Yeah. Why do the logos look so similar? All that stuff. So we'll talk about that here in just a second. All right, we're back, and we wanted to talk a little bit more about the transition from when we got the petitions, basically. We had enough signatures, and then the next step was, all right, now it's going to be on the ballot, and you have to people have to vote for it, whether they want it or not, the charter change. And so I want to talk for a minute about what that day was like when we knew we had the signature, because that was important. I guess it was, I think we had to turn the signatures in, and I think we counted them, and then always the election commission throws a certain number out. They're not valid for some reason, whether they
Yeah.
They're not the right address anymore, or some other problem. It was a duplicate maybe.
Yep.
And so there's always a certain percentage that get tossed out. And so we felt pretty good about the fact that we had it, but there's no guarantee, right?
Right.
And again, it felt so surreal to even accomplish that, that I kind of, that day's a blur for me. I don't remember much about that other than just like, okay, now we have more problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, now we got to get it passed.
Yeah, now we got to like have a real campaign, like an election type campaign.
Right.
To like make sure people know about this thing and know what it means. And I do know for a fact that I don't want to be the only one talking here, but I do know for a fact that the first, like, we knew one thing. We knew that legally, after that petition was done and it was on the ballot, we weren't legally allowed anymore to just not have some kind of registration with the government. We had to.
Yes. We had to become essentially a referendum committee, which is so similar to like a political action committee where you're basically.
Oh, it's called a single issue committee. That's what it's called.
Yeah, that's right.
That was the official name of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it's the same as a political action committee where you're basically campaigning for a candidate.
Right. As soon as you push for a vote as a group, you have to register.
Right. So the moment it went on the ballot, like we had done our research and we knew that we had to become legal. I know we got a lot of questions just even trying to get it onto the ballot of like, how is this legal? How can you be so organized and like this be legal?
You're obviously nefarious because you are organized that way, right?
Exactly,
There's
right.
secrets happening.
But I mean that's how. So like the state doesn't actually require you to legally organize and actually state membership or have a list of like campaign contributions or anything like that until it's actually something that people are going to vote on publicly.
Yeah.
So we we went through all the paperwork, like had a treasurer.
That was me.
Yep.
You were the treasurer?
I was.
I did not even know that.
Yep.
Got a separate bank account, raised funds.
It was a lot of
we
work,
we did all the things that you would do if you were running for office. We just did it to support this one ballot initiative.
Yeah.
And really the game plan didn't change, right?
Nope.
Like same organization, same people. All of a sudden, like nobody got paid.
No.
Like there was no campaign funds being like spread around for like a salary or something. It was literally just, hey, we're gonna still take the same roles that we had before, but we need money to like buy signs or like to be able to pay for advertising or any of the costs that go with like running a campaign.
Do you guys remember how much you spent on For Nolensville?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't remember. It was maybe a few $1,000s.
Yeah, it was not much.
No, because I will say this though. One thing to be clear of, I do remember this distinctly. Number one, we were very concerned about integrity and how we did things. If it was required by law, we didn't just like make it look like we were following the law. We actually did it. One example would be the second that charter, the petition got. We got enough signatures and now it's an official element on the ballot. Lisa Garamoni said, you know what? I'm out because I think I might run for office.
Yep.
And I'm a candidate. And she said, I wish you the best, but do not I'm out of this. I don't want to be included in the communications.
Yep.
Like if I learn about something, I want to know about it publicly the way everybody else knows about it. Don't involve me anymore.
Yep.
For the sake of integrity, that it's not just I want to look like I'm doing the right thing. I want to make sure that in every way I actually am doing the right thing. And I can honestly say that every step of the way, both with the petition and with For Nolensville, we pursued like real integrity with what we did.
And we had no choice either. Like, so we not me specifically, but I know that everybody, like Chris still had the brewery. Like he couldn't mess up. If this didn't work and if it came crashing down with like a technicality or just it failed miserably, like his brewery would have taken a hit.
Mm-hmm.
Like you got like I had a reputation of the insider, so I didn't carry any of the burden. But like there was like Lisa wanted to run for office eventually. Derek was in office. Like
so yeah, he backed out too. He was like, you know what? He was vocal supporter of like what he cared for. But yeah, he backed out too.
Yeah, but everyone that was involved in it had a reputation, a job, or something on the line. We had to follow exactly to the letter of the law, and we had to put all our effort into it because collectively we needed it to succeed.
Right.
So
well, and so what we did was we talked about it though. Like we had worked so hard to like make Better Nolensville like a name that people recognized, almost like a brand in its own way. And that's one of your expertise is like brand. Like what does that mean? What does the word brand mean? And I don't want to go to like marketing nerd because that's like my world and that's your world. But that mattered to us. It was like we've done all this work, but at the same time, like we can't keep the same name. Right. Because that doesn't work. Because then it's like, how does the government know that like the thing before was just citizens organizing, which is what Better Nolensville was, versus like now we're actually pushing for a measure on a ballot and we're required to like officially organize and like fill out paperwork. So it was, what do we want? We're going to organize. We're going to have an official name. The other question that kind of came with that was, okay, well, can we find out what the language was going to be on the actual ballot? Because the biggest thing you always see is like you always see like signs in other people's yards like vote no on measure number 2 or whatever. And so we wanted to find out what that was, and we've learned that the ballot was going to say for or against that referendum. And so we said we want people to vote for, and we've got Nolensville. And so we were like, okay, people recognize the Better Nolensville logo. It's all this, not all, it's mostly the same people.
Let's just change the word.
Let's just change the word.
Yeah.
And let's make sure the word for is very like, clear. That's what that is. There was no question. There was no secret. We weren't trying to hide that it was a bunch of people from Better Nolensville. To be clear also, we never talked about this. When we launched Better Nolensville, we literally took headshots of ourselves signing a petition one by one and posted them online.
With our names.
Yes.
Our names.
Yeah. There was no like question about, so like there's like this whole like nags thing happening right now. Like, and they're like, oh, that's not a thing.
Yeah.
They got spooked, I think, because they like realized the government might be interested in like how organized they are about voting a certain way, which when we did that, we had to fill out paperwork. All of a sudden, they're like, well, they had a secretary. We said this before.
We didn't have a secretary.
No, we didn't have one.
No notes taken.
But I want to make sure. Yeah, I want to make sure that this gets passed across to the camera again. We literally have seen every NAGS email that's ever been sent. So everyone who's saying it's not real. I mean, there's like 50 people. We saw like when you guys met somewhere at a certain candidate's house. Like we know about all of it. So like to act like you don't exist and you're not organized is just ludicrous. The difference is when we did it, we actually were willing to put our face on it and admit it and say we're proud of what we're doing. We're not scared of everyone knowing what we're involved in. But
we're willing to tell you the story about how we did it after the fact.
Yeah, we'll tell you about versus like
this is like a behind the music.
Yeah, which by the way I think so maybe next episode we'll talk about election games that are being played in the past and the present. Yeah. But the other little piece like For Nolensville. So like I had done a lot of the work on the website, and I knew that legally we couldn't just like change the website name and like call it the same thing. So I went through all the work of like literally doing an in-kind donation of assets for the website and like transfer. It was like I didn't have to do that from like a technical perspective. I did all this insane work just so we could have integrity as an organization. And so that's why like it really like upsets me when like people act like we were being secretive. It's the same thing as like people can just like hurl accusations without backing it up. And again, people called Better Nolensville a bunch of bullies, but I said this in the last episode, like I would always challenge them. Show us one screenshot. Show us one thing. Give us a link. And just silence. It's always silence. But that election day, after all that work, I remember I took the day off and I worked at the polls. I held signs out at Sunset Middle School, I think is where I was. Maybe there was a poll there. Yeah. And it's just again, I told you during a break. I said it feels surreal. I couldn't feel emotion almost. It was
was the exact opposite.
Really?
Oh yeah. There's two. So aside from like very personal things like having kids and getting married, there's two moments in my life where I completely lost my crap. Like, completely just melted down in the moment. One was the Cubs winning the World Series. It was like a complete, like, this finally happened. I can't believe I'm a part of this.
Yeah.
And then I remember the vote coming out. I remember the early coming in, right when the polls closed, and sitting in my playroom with my entire family, and then I'm like trying to do the math. I'm like, we're up by this much. Like, early voting is a very big fact. Like, it's a very big sample size, and like just constantly refreshing the page, watching the YouTube link for the election commission, and as soon as it like hit like 72 to 28 percentage wise, just completely like I'm talking about like roaring and talking my lungs like finally
Love it.
like I'm finally like it's over.
Yeah.
No, it was brutal, man. That was a really brutal process. Like from getting challenged online every single day
Yeah.
to like putting in so much work, and like the COVID thing was a big issue. Like it felt like every couple of weeks there was another hurdle to like cross, and it was like, well, now you can't go door to door. Now the signing stations are not working that great. Now like the kids are out of school, so everybody's schedule's out of whack, and finally figuring out doing the door hangers and like waiting on Denta to tell us the numbers every morning. Like it was brutal. Like it would have been much easier if it was without COVID, obviously, and it would have been much easier if the government was at least willing to accept the idea that the citizens want to do this, because the whole time we're fighting the government, literally. Like they're like Larry Phelps was up every single month talking about how we're trying to administer a coup.
Yeah,
like
that's true.
These are people in power that are like painting us in this evil light, and we're trying to like in our minds, and like history has proven us right already. We're trying to better Nolensville,
right?
And then the people that are representing Nolensville, that hold all the power, are making us this evil entity that's trying to overtake government.
I mean, I remember there was a moment. I don't remember how far into the process it was, but there was a moment when the town attorney for Nolensville was sent to the election commission meeting.
Yeah, with the screwed up Zoom. With the screwed up Zoom.
But like he was
in a car.
He was basically like he was basically like sent to meet with the election at their meeting to like talk on behalf of Nolensville. To somehow like ensure that this process was being done properly.
No,
and,
to make sure that we don't need two questions on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's save that for the next episode, because I think our next episode is going to be we talked about like maybe like election shenanigans. Or not. We already used that word in an episode. So past and present games with the election.
Right.
But I do want to say, everybody might not actually know this, but because you won't find everyone on the board of commissioners now promoting this, but the city of Nolensville actually won an award for the charter change, signifying or commemorating the fact that the charter change, the citizen-led charter change in Nolensville, is the first time in Tennessee state history that has ever happened.
Yep.
And it actually hasn't happened since. This is the only time in the history of the state of Tennessee that these citizens have organized and decided on their own to change their form of government in any town, anywhere.
I love it personally because, I mean, you just think about American history and you think about how this country was started. And it was literally started with some people rising up, meeting in some back rooms, maybe in a tavern, maybe over a beer.
It was in a tavern.
I mean, that's what they say. That's what they say happened. But literally, our founding fathers meeting together and saying, like, enough with the tyranny. We're done. Like, we're going to rise up and we're going to start a revolution. And that's literally what whoever put that into the state code, like the statute that said you can do that, was obviously thinking about. Hey, at a local level, we want to give people the same. It's like the American right. Yeah. That like if you don't like how things are being done, you have the right to rise up. As long as you get everyone else on your side, or at least a majority of them, to say, yeah, we're with you, then this is how it goes.
And at the end of the day, 72% of voters threw the T in the harbor.
Right.
That's literally what happened.
I mean, all that was missing was like the tar and the feathers.
I do wonder. I never thought of this before. I do wonder like I would love to. I don't know if there's a way to even find this out. Like who is responsible for that being in like Tennessee state law? Like where did that come from?
Buy that guy a beer. Get him the big boy.
I know, right? It's fascinating that like
Friday
someone,
night's going.
yeah, it's fascinating that someone even thought of
Yeah.
like that could be a possibility.
Yeah.
Especially the fact that like the state of Tennessee has been around for so long.
Right.
Like, and obviously that probably wasn't there at the beginning.
Sure.
Maybe it was, I don't know. But like the idea that someone somewhere, a legislator, introduced this into the town code,
Yeah.
or that's the city, or the state, whatever that is, and said, this could be a possibility someday.
Sure. You know what that guy also did? The guy also wrote in very important language in that code saying that if you do this, everything transfer over, including impact fees.
Ooh, I like that. All right. Mike's gone. So we're gonna come back. Thank you for watching Small Town Charm. The next episode is going to be about insane games that are being played in the election. Past, present, hopefully not in the future, but I think we can prevent some of that if we actually talk about it. So come back next time. Thanks for watching Small Town Charm.